Yeah, you're welcome. So, so I just started my PhD in February, and I'm really excited to show you the work I've been working on for also during my thesis. So it's on automated lesion detection, and I guess for a lot of people, lesion might not be a very common term to use, but it's kind of like scar tissue in your brain. I use a method called regressing intensity-based distance with a neural network. Of course, I have a lot of people collaborating with me, and I also collaborate with Quantif, so it's on the slide. Basically, I've mostly looked into perivascular spaces, which are lesions in the brain, which are spaces in the brain that are surrounding vessels that enter and leave the brain. So I guess I can't really point, but if you see the vessel, it surrounds the vessel, and when these spaces become enlarged because of immunological reactions, you can see them on MRI scans. So this PVS, the burden of these PVS in the brain is basically the amount of these lesions in the brain are an emerging biomarker. So there's been a lot of research around this already, and it's been associated with Alzheimer's disease and other diseases. Oh, do you hear me again? Okay. So research on this is really complicated because you need annotations for it, and that takes a lot of time. So as you can see here, this is an MRI scan with a lot of these lesions. So basically, they're like small little pointy things on these scans, and this is a 3D image of them. So they're really small, and the morphology is pretty complicated. And so this is a zoom in on an MRI scan of 1.5 Tesla. So it's pretty noisy, the scan. It's pretty hard to see which are PVS. So the arrows show the PVS. But it's really hard to see what are PVS, what is something else, what is just noise. So it would be really nice to actually have an automated way to do this. Because as you can see here, annotating this per slice, setting the contours, especially for the right image with like all these blue objects are PVS, would take super long. So yeah, basically, as I explained, manual annotations are very time-consuming. There's a high observer bias because it's so hard to distinguish between these lesions and other structures. Annotations are really difficult to acquire because they need expert knowledge, because it's really hard to do. And of course, experts have very little time, so that's very difficult. So we have an important trade-off between stronger annotations, so segmentation, so we get all the knowledge, all the information about these lesions, and the effort that it would take to segment all these lesions. So as you can see here, this is kind of the most common technique they use right now. They score the brain slices as no PVS, a mild PVS burden, moderate, frequent, or severe. But as you can see on the scan, it's pretty hard to distinguish which class you would want to put it in, and also you're throwing away a lot of information, basically. So segmentation would be better, but as you can see here, this is even only segmenting half a brain, and it just takes very long to do this for every slice. And the last important challenge is that we don't really have a real ground truth, so you really have to rely on the approximation that you get because of experts looking at it, because I guess you can't really slice open someone's brain and just check if these are PVS or not just because of research. So basically our question was, how can we train a CNN to detect PVS? So from an MRI scan, get some annotations. So we figured dot annotations were like the perfect balance between getting a lot of information but still feasible for a large set of scans, because we also want multiple patients, but if you would annotate with segmentations, that's just not feasible. And we want to do as well as expert rater at least, but doing better than the agreement of an expert rater, doing it twice would actually be just learning the style of the annotator. So we don't want to do better because that just means we're copying someone's technique, someone's style. So our approach is to annotate dots, which is relatively time efficient, and train a neural network to predict distance maps that we compute from these dot annotations. And from that, we can extract the actual detection proposals. So basically, this is the whole pipeline, but I'll guide you through that. So we have an MRI scan, and we have dot annotations for this MRI scan. And in the end, we want detection proposals. So we have a data set of 2,200 MRI scans, which is really great. You don't have that a lot in medical imaging. So it's from the retina scan study, which is a large population study, and it's a very homogeneous set, so it's single scanner, single actuation protocol. So from the full brain scan, we extract the white matter, because this removes a lot of distractions for the network. So we have dot annotations, actually just one slice per patient, because then we have a lot more patients. And the intra-rater agreement for our set, we computed on 30 scans, and with a couple weeks apart. So one rater first annotates like 30 scans, 2 weeks later annotates the same ones, and based on this, we only have a sensitivity of 56%, which shows how hard it is to annotate these lesions. So basically, there's only 56% overlap of the lesions he's finding. So we compute a distance map based on this MRI scan dot annotations. And normally you would compute it with Euclidean distance. I feel like that's the most normal way to do it. But for us, the morphology of these PVS is very complex and discriminative. And with a Euclidean distance map, it wouldn't account for morphology. So detecting a lesion just outside the lesion would be just as good as in the lesion. So we decided to use intensity-based distance measure to compute the distance maps, so to encourage the CNN to learn the characteristic morphology. So as you can see here, you have the Euclidean distance map. So it's basically just for every voxel the distance to the nearest dot annotation. So we decided to also compare this to intensity distance, which is just the path of intensity differences to one dot annotation. So it's just the difference between intensity between voxels and then over the whole path. And then we have geodesic distance as sort of in the middle of that, which uses intensity distance and Euclidean distance, and it's basically sort of a weighing between these two distances. So we use a pretty simple CNN. It's a UNet-like CNN, and we train it to predict this distance map. So we basically use a mean squared error loss to optimize, to quantify the difference between the distance maps we computed on the images and the prediction of the network. So this is our convolutional neural network, and as you can see, it's only 8 convolutional layers, and it's basically a UNet with one level, and it predicts the exact same size image. It outputs the same size image as it gets in. So after we get the prediction of the network, we use non-max suppression and a threshold to get from these predicted distance maps to actual detection proposals. And once we have these detection proposals, we compare the dot annotations and these detection proposals using the Hungarian algorithm, which is basically just matching the dot annotations and detection proposals, the closest ones. And in the end, we choose the maximum distance to be the lesion diameter. So that's, the lesions are defined between 1 and 3 millimeters. So basically 6 voxels that it can be off. Yeah. So basically this is the whole network. And then this is kind of a visualization of how it's learning to detect these perivascular spaces. So basically at first it just has kind of a random image, and then after a while you see that it's really finding these lesions, which is really nice. So the current results we have is, so because we don't really know what threshold to choose, we mostly look at the FROC, because in the end, because this like intra-rater set is so difficult, so actually I should tell you this first. Sorry, these red crosses is the intra-rater agreement. So what I told you before, this is our kind of, I guess, upper bound of what we can achieve. So in the FRC, you can see that we with this intensity-based distance method, we can achieve the same performance, but it's not totally clear where to actually choose our threshold. And we thought it was nice to see that actually this intensity distance really improved the performance we achieved with Euclidean distance, and it's really seeming to improve the results, especially if you look at the output of the network. So as you can see, on the total right, the Euclidean distance really sort of finds blobs, and it's not well as that you can see that's already kind of finding segmentations, which is great, because we're hoping in the end that we can go from dot annotations to actually achieving already segmentations without needing to actually train on segmentations. So basically, the summary of the research we did right now is that we can optimize a CNN to detect PVS with dot annotations, that including intensity information and distance maps really improves the detection performance, and that right now we kind of reach our upper bound that we can match the inter-radar agreement on PVS detection. So I guess that just mostly brings us to a whole bunch of new questions that we want to look into, which is that we want to apply it to different brain regions, and especially to full brain scans, because it would be great that we just get a full brain scan and we output all the PVS detections, and they can use that for further research. So we really also want to look into false positives, because this intra-radar agreement is so low. It would be nice to see if this network is finding like a clear pattern and really finding these PVS, or what kind of false positives it's finding. And maybe we can even do better than human performance right now. That would be great. Yeah, and we want to evaluate the segmentation performance, see if that is actually working as well as we think it's working. And we would also really like to see if it works on different data, because right now we have a really... Yes, so right now we just have the dot annotation, so we can only evaluate that. But we're working on a segmentation set. So right now, actually, there's medical students annotating for us, which is actually the perfect part-time job and during your study. But so they're contouring these lesions, and actually, so we just started on this, and there's a couple scans they've been annotating, and they're still only doing one slice, and one actually took 2.5 hours for one scan. So there's so many PVS. So, so yeah, once we have this set, that would be great to evaluate with, but it's more challenging even than I realized to get this set. Yeah, so it would be great to have this for the whole set, but we only did it for 30 scans. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of, it sounds kind of weird, because there's basically no ground truth. But what we do is we compute based on the first annotations. So we kind of take the first annotation as ground truth first, and then compare with the second time and the other way around, and then average based on that. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. I also have a question. So I know that there is another disease with, where white matter lesions are involved. It's called multiple sclerosis. I'm wondering whether you considered using your approach for multiple sclerosis data. That's question number one. Question number two, I'm not sure if these patients exist where both kinds of lesions coexist, and I'm wondering what could be done to distinguish these vascular lesions from MS lesions.
Oh, yeah. So, thanks. So, right now we're working on a population study, so there's some other lesions in there, but not a lot. Like for multiple MS data sets, it would, there would be a lot of more distractions. So that's actually also something we want to look into soon, or also a stroke data set maybe, to see if our network will work as well then. And so right now there's already some lesions that it gets distracted with, like lacunes are very similar to PVS, and also so white matter lesions, actually, it seems to distinguish really well between, even if there's PVS close to white matter hyperintensities, but we really have to look more into that. But yeah, that would be really nice to look into more. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I also used a unit with sort of 3 layers, and I know a lot of people like deeper is better, but I like simple approaches, because I actually also thought about using FRCNN or something, but actually this was my first approach that I wanted to first kind of try the most easy way. So I actually did also try this 3-level, but it worked as well or worse, actually. So I think right now this smaller network is just exactly what it needs to work. But I definitely think if we're looking into more complicated data sets, that maybe adding a few layers would sometimes help, but I really have to look into this, yeah. Sorry? Sorry, do I? Oh. I just didn't hear. Oh, yeah. So we use rotation and shifting, but not a lot of augmentation. I want to look into if elastic deformations would help. So I think I relatively augment a little. So I think it's like 20 degrees maximum that I rotate. And then I think I do this. Yeah, so because I'm only using one slice and I have a 3D image, I already kind of had to change my computations to be able to evaluate the loss only of that slice. So I basically only evaluate over the part that I rotated, and then the rest I just kind of leave out. I just don't evaluate the loss over it. Yeah, 1 GPU. So 8 gigabytes. Yeah, so that's actually the problem with full brain scans right now. Yeah, so that's why I'm limited right now that's part of the reason why we're only using white matter right now and not the full brain, because it would be too big to use. No, not yet. I think the direction we use right now is mostly looking into how we could get it to work, and we tried some different things. But I want to look into this elastic deformation and then also see if even augmentation helps at all. Yeah, so I haven't done a lot yet to visualize the features, so I definitely want to look into this, especially because my PhD subject is actually deep transfer learning, so I really want to look into this domain annotation more and see if but this is a really nice thing that you brought up.
All right, excuse me. In the interest of time, I suggest to move this discussion to the, no, yes, let's take one more question and move on.
Oh yeah, I didn't really.
Okay. One more question is, yep.
Thanks.
You said that you trained on data that came from one machine, basically.
Yeah.
And I think one big issue in MRI scans is to transfer those results to other machines.
Yeah.
Processing stuff. Do you have any kind of feeling of if you could transfer a model which was trained on this machine to scans that come from another machine? Do you already try this?
So I think right now, I haven't tried it yet, and I think right now the biggest problem would be that I don't do any augmentation in terms of zooming, and this is a really nice set because it's all the same voxel spacing, so it's all 0.5 millimeters in XY and then 1 in Z. Yeah, and it's registered, and so because my PhD is supposed to also be around about deep transfer learning, I'm really interested in looking more into if it would work. So I'm actually thinking right now to look into the zooming augmentation, see if that would already help with some voxel spacing things and some intensity augmentation. And I want to look more into how I could actually use it on different data sets, because really this data set is great in terms of that you can get a model to work nicely on it, but the moment you try it on some other, I don't think this method would work immediately on another data set. I do think that if I would do a lot of pre-processing on the other data set, it would work. But you don't want to do that, right? So, yeah.
Your PhD is deep transfer learning?
Deep transfer learning, yeah. Yeah. So. Sorry?
You could frame it as domain adoption.
Yeah, domain adaptation. I think that's a better term for it, yeah. I think deep transfer learning, people mostly think of fine-tuning, pre-training, yeah. Thanks. Thanks for your question.
So I would say we'll go to the next presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.